going on, guys? Welcome back to this week's episode of Outside the Arena. I'm Griffin Senek alongside my co-host Devin Bernstein, and we're back. We picked a rough week to miss. The post Super Bowl week episode was nowhere to be found, so we got it for you today. 2 weeks later, we know you've been waiting on it. But yeah, we're going to talk Super Bowl mainly today. Obviously, there's a lot going on. Probably stuff we'll touch on in future episodes. Baseball, spring training kicking off. NFL free agency on the horizon. NFL draft going to start to pick up some stuff. We'll get our mock drafts going. So stay tuned for all that. Obviously, the NBA was over. The All-Star break was pretty cool to see Steph and Sabrina go at it. I think that was probably the highlight of the weekend. We kind of just talked off air how the All-Star game is kind of in a weird spot. Definitely not as fun or competitive as it probably should be. I think that's a problem most sports are having with the All-Star games at this point. Really, I guess baseball is one of the only ones that feels like that's never been an issue. But alas, we're going to touch and talk about the NFL today. Super Bowl Chiefs, they got it done. I mean, 25-22. It was a boring game for a while. First half was a little slow, but then towards the end, I mean, it just became an instant classic. Mahomes obviously led the way. Kelsey, strong second half. I mean, I know the game was 2 weeks ago, Dev, but your thoughts on the game and anything you want to touch on?
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't thought about the Super Bowl in a couple of days. Obviously, it's been a while, but it just brought up like the first thing that I thought about was how good of a damn game it was.
Yeah,
Um, just the second ever Super Bowl game to ever go to overtime. I would say, of the Super Bowls, I can really, remember what was going on. Probably starting with the second Giants Super Bowl of our lifetimes. So the 2013 season, that was a great game. Obviously the Seahawks Patriots game was great. Falcons Patriots, Eagles Patriots. Um, and then, last year between the Chiefs and the Eagles, which obviously has a bit of a dark place in my heart because Eagles lost. But those were all great games, and I think this is right up there with them. A lot of intrigue. The classic the Niners go up double digits script is still fun for the NFL, it appears. You know, I mean, it was just like the Niners came out, they were themselves. They looked like their offense was, as usual. The Chiefs defense, as good as it looked in the playoffs before that, didn't look quite up to snuff at the very beginning. And then everything just sort of slowly started turning on its head, and Mahomes got more and more comfortable. Kelsey got going. The defense really, really clamped down. Um, and then, you just have the best football player in the world. That really helps. I mean, he's just like it's just so obvious, or not
yeah,
obvious, so unsurprising when Mahomes just wills his teams to plays. And
yeah,
it just like the dude is so good. I mean, it's like it's so obvious, but like he can make every throw. He can run for first downs. He's always making the right decision, it seems like at this point. Like this is a bad NFL wide receiver room. Like let's not forget that. Like Rashee Rice
yeah,
is a good number two. I mean, maybe a low end one if we're gonna be so generous here. I mean, I think he's gonna be a really good player, but
yeah,
rookie year, true number one wide receiver, and then your number two and number three are in a much worse spot than the number one was. And again, you do have Kelsey, you do have Mahomes, you do have Reed, but it's just so impressive that they were able to bring this weak position group that is so valuable, that the Niners don't have a weak position group like that. Like maybe their interior offensive line, but I would argue that's a much less important, like in terms of value, group, and that their group was probably better than the Chiefs receiver group was. So
yeah,
it's not something you see, like such an important position group be so weak and you still win a Super Bowl. Yeah, I mean, there's obviously the Mahomes GOAT talk, and it's like, first of all, he's like, 7 or whatever years into his career. Like, it's way too early to tell because he probably has at least double to potentially like triple that, depending on how long he wants to keep going for.
yeah,
Um, but it's like Like, yeah, I think it's pretty like I watched Brady for years. Brady is the only guy that I think is even comparable to Mahomes and vice versa that I've seen. I mean, maybe, a prime Rodgers, but he doesn't even have the accolades that Mahomes
Yeah,
has, at the very end of his career to Mahomes compared to Mahomes, who seems to be at like the halfway mark. So,
yeah,
um, yeah, I mean it's those two guys. It's Brady and Mahomes. Like, I think Brady has the better career because Mahomes hasn't had the full career yet. I think Mahomes is the better player than Brady ever was. I don't know if that's crazy to hear for some people, and Brady is probably the second best, pretty easily if he's not the best, but um I just think it goes to show that Mahomes is just so special and yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people are tired of the Chiefs. They do get a lot of coverage,
yeah,
it's the whole Taylor Swift thing, but I don't know. I think we've talked about this both on and off air. It's just not the most annoying thing in the world to either of us.
yeah.
I guess maybe if they win like the next two Super Bowls, I'll start to get really, really sick of them. But at this point, I don't find myself angry that the Chiefs are super successful. Hats up to them. I expect them to be back in the coming years. I just don't this just feels like such a good formula as long as Kelsey
Yeah.
is there. Um yeah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, great game, obviously, like you said. I do want to, I forgot to, I do want to talk about the coin toss decision after I kind of give my spiel on the game. But yeah, it was a good game. I mean, it felt like the Niners really had them. They were in control for that whole first half, and they just didn't get the lead that they needed to. You knew Mahomes was going to start scoring eventually. Obviously, that Niners defense played by far the best it did all playoffs. I mean, they shut down Mahomes for a while. It took a while for the Chiefs to get going. They had that one big play to I guess was it Hardman that had the big catch,
I
or
think it was
I think it was
Hardman.
Hardman, yeah. And then the Pacheco fumble right after, like, they had their moments and they just couldn't capitalize. And I think it shows how good this Chiefs defense is. I mean, what a job they've done. I mean, it's crazy because I mean, I was talking about it for a class this week, but it felt like this was the year to get the Chiefs. Like, they didn't have the wide receiver core. The offense was kind of a mess for most of the year. They were the 3 seed. Like, we haven't seen this before with them, and they still win the Super Bowl. It's like it just doesn't freaking matter. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes, like, everyone knows how good he is. Everyone knows he's the best, and people just like every year. It feels like we go through, or people go through a phase where it's like they just start doubting Patrick Mahomes, and it's like, what are you doing? Like, it's like the only people who have beaten him in the playoffs are Tom Brady, who did it twice, and then Joe Burrow, who is that dude as well. I mean, he's won on the biggest stages. So yeah, I mean, it's crazy that people doubt this guy. I mean, he's made the AFC Championship in every single game this season, and I think honestly, it's maybe a topic for another day, but it's got to make GMs rethink what you're doing at the quarterback position and giving some of these guys contracts. Like, it just like it's not going to be good enough. Like, the guy who comes to mind right now, Baker Mayfield. Like, he had a hell of a season. He was great, but like, Baker Mayfield is not going to beat Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. Like, that's just not going to happen. He's not going to beat Joe Burrow in the playoffs. He's not going to beat all these guys. So it's like, why invest all this money? And I get it. You need a good quarterback, but it's just like it's such an interesting topic. It goes back to, I mean, the Giants decision last year. You can tie into that. Um, it's just a fascinating thing, and I think you just got to realize, like, right now, like, you have got to have that guy. And obviously, look, the Niners, Brock Purdy had a great year, but it wasn't good enough in the end. And yeah, I mean, they just played a strong game. The Chiefs, defensively, pretty lights out. Obviously, unfortunate Drake Greenlaw, tore his Achilles. That was kind of crazy. And before I even forget to mention, prayers out to the victims of the shooting at the parade. Obviously, we didn't talk about that last week either. Very, very sad and horrific to see. So our thoughts are with anyone affected by that. But going back to the game, yeah. Um, the Chiefs kind of just did what they did, and they stayed composed. Well, I guess I can't say they stayed composed because I mean, Travis Kelce was shoving Andy Reid on the sidelines. So maybe composure is not the best word to talk about the Chiefs, but they've been there before, and I think that was the difference. And you know they always knew they were going to be fine down the stretch, and they ended up getting the job done. And real quick, I mean, shout out to both the kickers in this one. I mean, Jake Moody and Harrison Tucker. I mean, these guys are trading 50 yarders left and right, like setting new Super Bowl records. Like, holy cow, like insane. I mean, props to them. I know I alluded to it, so I'll ask you. I mean, the coin toss decision, obviously the Niners with the new Super Bowl rules, which this was a whole mess. I mean, you had Kyle Juszczyk and other players saying that they didn't even know the rules. You see it on NFL films, like they had no idea that that was a new rule. Chiefs were like, yeah, we talked about it like 20 times in a meeting. I mean, I think that's a whole other conversation. But your thoughts on the decision? You know, I know it really was the big topic the day after in the media, got a lot of steam. Um, you know, I've had back and forth thoughts on it, so I'll let you start off with your thoughts on the decision.
Yeah, I mean, granted, everything I'm about to say should be taken with the knowledge that I would have taken the ball
Yeah,
second. Um, but I don't think it was like the wrong decision that costed them the game. But well, first of all, I think it's important to note this. Every team gets an opportunity at a possession. Um, no matter how long the first drive and second drive takes. So basically the time doesn't really matter.
yeah, the time was weird.
Yeah, so that was kind of confusing to me. So I was just like generally confused by the rules in the Super Bowl, and like that never happens for me. So I was a little out of sorts because we've never seen this overtime format. But um yeah, I mean, it's like it just gives you a bit more like leeway, I feel like, and the way these overtime games tend to go, it just feels a little bit more advantageous to have it second. Guys are super tired by this point, and we've seen it time and time again. When guys are tired, it's going to affect the defense a little bit first. It just it just felt harder and harder to stop both of these teams as the game went along. But I'll be honest, the decision I'm more upset about, or not upset because I'm happy that Chiefs won, but like thinking about more is the fourth down decision. Because if you're gonna get it first and you're gonna go against you're knowing you're going against Patrick Mahomes, I'm trying to score a touchdown no matter what. And I just I know it's so cliche, and I know hindsight is 2020, but why the hell are you giving Mahomes the ball back with a chance to go win the game? Like what? Like why? I don't know. I know it's simple, and um, there's so much more that goes into that decision, but like I just don't. I just can't imagine having been like, okay, we're gonna live with a scenario where we have a good drive and we still have to give Mahomes the ball back with a chance to go and win the game. Like,
Yeah.
and we don't have a chance to rebuke it. Like, just doesn't feel like the smartest decision. But I'll say this about the Niners not knowing the overtime rules. Like, what are we doing? Like it doesn't really matter. But like, what? How do you guys
No.
not know what's like? First of all, like, what do you guys think happened 2 years ago when the overtime rules changed? Like, that was just a
Yeah.
joke or something? Like, but also, it's like, why is there not a meeting where they go over it? Like, they had a bye as well. Like, I just a little bit confusing. The Niners seem to be finding all sorts of things to complain about. Just put a smile on my face. Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't think it was like some egregious decision, but I also do think I would have gone for the ball second, especially in that type of game. Yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, I think, when I was watching the game, I was kind of perplexed at what they were doing. I was like, well, why are we doing that? And one of my friends was like, oh, well, then, if there's, if they both score field goals, if they both score touchdowns in that third possession or whatever, which I was kind of like, okay, like that does make sense. Like, let's say they both score the same, then it's like, that's a huge advantage. You get the ball and you score and you win. Um, but I just, I guess really the only scenario where we would have seen that is if they both had to take field goals, which I guess could have been possible. Like if you got the Chiefs to like 4th and 12, like obviously they were going to kick it or something. But yeah, I probably would have taken the ball second as well. I think, like you said, like I think there is a big advantage in knowing what you have to score because it's like you still at the end of the day can win the game and not like the game will end. Like the Chiefs were saying they were going to go for two, which is like probably the smart move. Like just like you control the destiny, you have Patrick Mahomes, like yeah, like end the game. Um, so I think like you said, like you don't want to give Mahomes the ball knowing what he needs, knowing what he has to do. Um, but like on the other side, like I get it, like their defense was just out there, like giving their defense a breather. Like if they probably kicked first, like the Chiefs were going to go down and score anyways. So obviously, then you can get the ball back and know what you need. But I forget who was saying it. I don't know if it was Tony Romo on the broadcast or someone the day after. It might have been Dan Orlovsky actually. Um, but I think the biggest mistake is just like when you give the Chiefs the ball second, you're giving Mahomes four downs, which is just like such a big advantage. Like when Patrick Mahomes is getting four downs guaranteed, I mean, that's just like so big. And look, the Niners had a chance to win. I mean, they had the what, 4th and 1 or something like that. Like the game was right there. So it's like, I think the decision has been a little blown out of proportion because at the end of the day, like the Niners had the game right there, like one stop and, they would have had a championship parade. But that's just kind of how it goes. So, you know, it's kind of the recap. I would have taken the ball second because I think, it's definitely more advantageous to know, what you need to get and also, keep the ball out of Mahomes' hands with a chance to win. But, you know, at the end of the day, I don't think it's a be all end all. And, they also had more chances to win that game in regulation, in terms of did they have a missed extra point? A blocked extra point, right?
Blocked
There's
extra point
always
ends up
one of
being
those
huge.
freaking whenever there's a blocked, I think there was one in the there was definitely one in the Rams Bengals or something. I think it was because like David was like an extra point off from winning like 300 grand or something like that. One of our
I
friends.
remember that
Yeah.
happening as well.
Maybe that's how it came into play. But yeah, those extra points, man, they're devious. But yeah, man, shout out to the Chiefs. Like they're just a wagon at this point. So I'll kind of transition here. Um, Looking ahead, obviously, we've still got free agency, we've still got the draft. So this is way ahead. I think 49ers are Vegas's top team right now. Um, or at least they were, according to some sportsbook, which is interesting. I think that is what it is. I feel like I saw that on like ESPN too. Um,
Why is it not the Chiefs, man? Like I just should it not
I
just
guess
be
like I guess looking at if you do look at the free agents, let's say Chris Jones and Snead leave.
that's
49ers don't really have any massive free agents like that. So I guess I can kind of understand that. But yeah, I mean, uh, your thoughts. I mean, yeah. What are you thinking next year? I know it's super early, but obviously the Chiefs are an easy team to pick, but also anyone else you kind of like early on.
yeah, so I'll just go down like just very quickly. Like the Chiefs I think will be completely fine. I expect them to address playmaker. I do expect them to bring at least one of Snead or Chris Jones back. Honestly, probably both.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just feel like there's no way that they're gonna let them out of the building.
Also, the
Especially
real quick, the cap went up like 30 mil. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
like
really
crazy.
weird. I don't. No other league decides the cap like that close to the offseason. It's very interesting that they do that. The Niners, I'm worried about them like longer term, but not next year. I still think McCaffrey will be really, really, really good next year. But he is an aging running back with an injury history, so that probably will catch up to them at some point. The IU contract is coming up. And obviously you have an older roster, Chase Young expiring. But that being said, I do think the Niners will be really good next year. They would be my pick out of the NFC. Like I don't think it's unreasonable that they're the Super Bowl favorites. I just think it should be Mahomes at this
Yeah,
point, like or the Chiefs rather. But yeah, I'm not super worried about the Niners next year. I would be a little bit more worried when it gets to like you're paying Ayuk and you've let some guys go on defense and you're aging a little bit and McCaffrey starts to get hurt and now you're staring down the barrel of paying Purdy. That's when I'm starting to get more worried. Not necessarily at the loss of like a Chase Young and a couple of
yeah,
depth cuts. Like I'm not worried that no disrespect to Chase Young. He played a good game in the Super Bowl. But I just don't think that kills the Niners, especially because he was a midseason addition. Some other teams, I think the Ravens have a really tough offseason ahead. They have a lot of needs. They have a lot of free agents. They lost Mike McDonald. That's a little concerning. Um, I really am high on the Packers going forward. Not necessarily as a Super Bowl team, but I like everything that they've been doing. And I think my early super dark horse Super Bowl pick for next year would be the Colts. I just think
Interesting.
I just think you've got a solid core. You really only have to bring back Pittman and Grover Stewart as your only key free agents, but you still should have money if you do bring both of them back. You have all your picks. You have Richardson, who obviously has some absurd potential. Obviously, it'll be like his fifth start at the beginning of next year, which um, it's scary, but Mahomes, won MVP, with his first game being his second start. Obviously, I don't expect Anthony Richardson to be Mahomes, but
Yeah.
it can happen. I think people do underestimate the fact that, when you have a really good quarterback, they're usually going to show it pretty soon. Like this is getting into a little side tangent here, but like when was the last time we saw a guy like not work out on their first team? And then it's like, everyone is like clamoring. It's like Fields. It's like I like Fields. I still think Fields can be good, but it's like if a team drafts somebody in the first round as their franchise quarterback and they play 3 years and they're not really good, it's like, is that guy ever going to be really good? Like, probably not. Not to
Yeah.
say teams shouldn't trade for a Fields or anything like that, but like, I think there is something to be said that like you're probably going to know a little bit earlier than people might think.
Yeah.
But outside of that, I think the free agency and draft is obviously super
Yeah.
telling. I honestly love this part of the NFL season a lot as well. Like I would take the offseason and draft over, I just hate the offseason is my ultimate point. I love the season, I love the offseason, but I cannot stand when there's no draft going on and the NBA playoffs are done. That's when I get bored.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see like the balance between the AFC and NFC both next
Yeah.
year and going forward, like just feels like the like eight most physically gifted quarterbacks are all in the AFC. And I just wonder like I wonder what the Eagles are gonna look like next year. Obviously, my
Yeah.
favorite team, but I wonder how they look. Just as an objective NFL fan. Same thing with the Cowboys. I'm interested to see how the Lions look if they can improve their defense in a significant way. I just it's too early to say because we don't even know what these teams are gonna look like. We don't even know who's gonna be back and whatnot. But it's just it feels like another year where the AFC just has like more teams that seem Super Bowl caliber to me. Um, I don't know how true that is. I'm gonna be interested to see what the Jets look like because
Yeah.
I do get the sense that obviously they would have been way better this year if Rodgers had stayed healthy, but I do get the sense that this offense still would have been really bad. Um, just feels like they had like
Yeah.
two good starters on offense, like total once Elijah Vera Tucker got hurt. Um, so yeah, they have a lot of work to do with that offense. I'll say that, and I hope Aaron Rodgers doesn't just get to bring in his buddies again because that clearly doesn't seem to work
Yeah.
very well. Um, but yeah, besides that, I'm excited for the offseason for the most part. What
Yeah.
about you?
No, definitely. I mean, yeah, thinking about it, like you said, I think the Chiefs would be my top team. I mean, I think they're gonna get better. Like they're gonna go out and either if it's through the draft or if they land like a Mike Evans or someone like that, like they're gonna get better at wide receiver. Um, and I like you said, I think Chris Jones is likely gonna stay. Jerry Sneed, probably. I think they're gonna do some restructuring with Mahomes' contract and the obviously getting more cap space with the addition of the 30 million or whatever helps. Um, the Bengals, I think, are going to be interesting to watch. I think, Joe Burrow this last year, it didn't seem like he was healthy at all. And obviously then he went down. So, seeing how they are, I think, that defense misses Jesse Bates. I think, obviously Trey Hendrickson's a great player. There's work to be done, though, just overall there. The Jets, like you said, are super interesting. I mean, that defense is playoff ready. Aaron Rodgers coming back will be great, but that O line is terrible. Like it needs to desperately be fixed. Barrett Tucker coming back will be good. Titman had a pretty solid year, but outside of that, like you don't really have any other starters. So you got to completely rebuild the O line and the wide receivers outside of Garrett Wilson are trash. So you got to have to rebuild the wide receiver room too. I mean, the Jets have a rough offseason. They had Bryce Huff's a free agent. Um, it's kind of a weird spot for them because it's like that defense is going to be so good that they should be able to win games, especially with Rodgers. But that O line needs to be better, and the wide receivers got to be better. So they're going to have to draft well, and that's something that Joe Douglas has done well at times, and also hasn't. And I think one thing about the Jets that they made the mistake of was picking Will McDonald this past year. Not that the guy is not going to be a good player. Hopefully, he will be, but you have Bryce Huff right there, who's obviously a guy that you probably want to keep in the building long term. And, that pick could have been used on the first wide receiver taken. If you picked Zay Flowers, if you picked a Jackson Smith and Jigba, if you picked Jordan Addison, I mean, obviously Quentin Johnson was in that mix too. He didn't really have a great rookie year, but, any of those guys really, especially the first three I mentioned, would have been so huge for that team. So, yeah, I mean, they're an interesting team. The Lions, I think, are going to be back in the mix. I think it'll be interesting. The one team that I think people have started to hype up and pump a little bit that I'm a little hesitant on is the Chargers. Like, I think it's going to take a year or two. They got to rebuild this roster a little bit. Like, they're kind of in a weird spot. Mike Williams might get cut this year for salary reasons. Keenan had a great year, but like inevitably, Father Time will catch up. Austin Eckler is a free agent. Will he be back? What does the running game look like? Um, that defense under Jesse Minter should be better, but do they keep Bosa? Do they keep Mack? Like, what's it going to look like? Like, I don't think the Chargers will be as good next year. I think it's going to be a little bit of they got to reload that roster a little bit. Get young. I don't know. I'm kind of rambling on a little bit, but yeah, I think it'll be very interesting. Obviously, free agency coming up. I think March 13th is when it kicks off. So it's going to be fun to see kind of where I mean, this year is actually really good free agency. There's a lot of big names. Chris Jones, obviously, like we mentioned. Kirk Cousins will be a free agent. Mike Evans, T. Higgins, although it seems like he'll get the tag. Antoine Winfield. I mean, the names go on and on. So potentially a lot of really talented players changing homes, and we'll see what happens. Obviously, the draft as well. Yeah, I mean, is there anything else you want to touch on, Dev? Or
Yeah, this like so unplanned in my ADHD brain, but I was I was wondering what like Kelsey and Kittle's contracts are looking like because obviously they're at like the top of the tight end market. I'll just say this. If you can find an elite tight end, definitely do it because they're getting paid like Gabe Davis money. Like I bet Gabe Davis is gonna get paid more this offseason than Kelsey and Kittle make. I think we
yeah,
all know that Kelsey and Kittle are both much more valuable than Gabe Davis. Like,
that is crazy. Yeah, I'm looking at this. I mean, next year it looks like, or I don't. I think is 2024 would be next year. Or
yeah,
yeah, so 12 million or 15 million cap hit. Like
yep.
Jesus, like the greatest tight end ever. I mean, it's like he's putting up wide receiver one numbers too. It's not even like
Yeah, and it's a
crazy.
position that's harder to find like good players. So you would imagine that the top end would, make like a higher percent. And like, granted, I'm not gonna argue that like Kelsey is more valuable than a Tyreek Hill, but like that's definitely a closer argument
Like,
than
yeah, it's not even
right?
that
Yeah,
crazy though.
right? Like that's not crazy to say that. I think it's a closer argument than that he's worse than Gabe Davis. Like, right? I mean, I think there's
Yeah,
no world where that should be the case. I understand the positional value argument, but
but not
how about
even
just
though, because
overall
it's like
value? Like,
like that doesn't even make sense. I don't understand how Kelsey's not. I don't know. That's crazy. I mean, he's going to be fine. With all the popularity and fame, I think he's bringing in
yeah,
probably almost. He could literally be bringing in more than his contract, like off the field right now. Like literally, probably
probably,
is actually.
probably,
No, I
yeah.
think the Pfizer thing was like he got paid 30 million. I think for that. Maybe I might be wrong. I feel like I
I
saw
wouldn't,
something like that.
yeah, I wouldn't,
Now I'm curious.
that would
Travis
seem like a
Kelsey
pretty hefty
payments
sponsorship.
for Pfizer commercial. $20 million is what
Yeah.
they gave him.
That's his salary next year, plus a
So it's
few
like
million.
if you've taken the off the field stuff, Kelsey's pretty much like paid like a quarterback. So I think he's all right.
He's also dating a billionaire,
Yeah,
so
he'll be okay. um, yeah. Well, I think with that'll do it for this week's episode of Outside the Arena. Pretty short, not too much to talk about, but I mean, there's a lot going on in sports. Obviously, we got March Madness coming up as well. So stay tuned for that. That's always a blast. Hopefully, my Northwestern Wildcats will get across the finish line. It seems like they're trending well, so hopefully they get in. But yeah, if you haven't already, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Check us out on Instagram as well. The whole shebang at Outside the Arena everywhere. Appreciate you guys all tuning in, and we'll be back next week on Outside the Arena.